My name is Alex Shore, and I'm
Atento la Alex Shore.
Buenas noches, Mia.
Quinn. We're hearing your audio here. I don't know if we're supposed to.
Sorry, that was my fault. I think you should be okay now.
Okay. Thank you, everyone who's starting to join the meeting. We're going to take a couple minutes before we get going and just have everyone get settled, make sure more folks can join us. So feel free to hang out for a couple minutes. And we're really excited to have you here. More people are joining. This is great. Welcome, Brian. Welcome, Cliff. Welcome, Jordan. Welcome, Michael. Welcome, Rob. Welcome, Tuan. Welcome, Chris. Good to have you here. As people are joining the room, feel free. I sometimes in a meeting that I'm facilitating like to play some music. We're not doing that tonight, but if you want to introduce yourself in the chat function, feel free. If you want to say your favorite song to open up a Zoom meeting, I'm welcome to hear any of that information if you want to share it with the group. Just a fun way to get warmed up because we're going to hear a lot of good feedback from you tonight, and we welcome you sharing right off the bat. And we'll get going here in a couple minutes. Some more folks joining us. Looks like Alice, welcome. Emil, welcome. Jade, welcome. Thanks for coming. Oh, great. People are introducing themselves in the chat function. That is super welcome. Thank you. And Jordan, you're responding to the prompt. Very kind of you. Thank you. It's okay. You don't need to play meeting before Zoom. Sometimes I do it if I'm trying to pump up everyone. I don't know what song I would have played today. Maybe something popping into my head is Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come, if anyone knows that song. Hopefully we're going to talk about some changes that VTA can help with tonight too. Welcome, Lucius. Welcome, Kevin. Thanks for coming. Welcome, Daniel. And if folks want to introduce themselves in the chat function, you're welcome to do that. Love to know your name, perhaps the community you live in. And we've got some folks sharing their affiliations, which is welcome too. Welcome, Arthur. Welcome, Christina. Thanks for joining us. Welcome, Bruce. Good to see you here, Bruce. Thanks for coming. All right, well, we've got a good crowd joining us tonight. Rob, if you're ready to go, let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, let's get started. Thank you.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really excited to be here tonight. My name is Alex. I'm with Catalyze SV. I'll introduce myself a little bit more in a few minutes. We do have interpreters here. We have Eloisa in Spanish. If you can raise your hand and say hello. There's Eloisa. We've got Quinn translating in Vietnamese. Hey, Quinn. And we've got Jen Ting translating in Mandarin. If anyone needs interpretation, please feel free to click the language you would like to hear at the button at the bottom of your screen. Even if it's English, you should click that just to make sure that you're hearing it. That would be great. Just see if we could go back one slide. Sorry, Deanna. So again, welcome everyone. This is VTA's Equitable VMT Mitigation Program, which is a fancy, important way of saying we are working at VTA to reduce the number of car miles driven in our community. And we want your input tonight on 3 different options for how we can do that. So we've got some really important concepts, 3 of them that we're going to share with you. And we're going to spend a lot of this meeting, in fact, most of this meeting, getting your ideas on how we might implement those concepts. And we'll talk a little bit about, at the end of the presentation, how we're going to use that information and our next opportunity to come back together with you to share that information on what we learned and also continue to have engaged in this process. So thank you again, everyone, so much for joining. We will be breaking up into small groups in about 30 minutes, and we'll spend most of our time there. If you need to talk with anyone at VTA or the Fair and Peer staff, which is our main consultant on this project, you can do that after the meeting if you have any additional comments or questions. We want to encourage you to use the chat function for comments today or introductions. We're going to get to questions a little later. So if you can wait on those questions until deeper on in the presentation, that's appreciated. But again, feel free to make comments and introduce yourself in the Zoom chat function. Great. Okay, let's go to the next slide, which we pretty much covered. So we're already starting to get into our welcome introductions. I want to introduce some more folks in a moment. We're going to talk a little bit about how reducing the number of vehicle miles traveled. Again, this is the amount of cars driving the amount of miles, how that benefits you as community members. We're going to talk about phase 1 of the community engagement process on this program. This is now phase 2, and we're going to tell you what we heard from you, the community, in that first phase. And we're going to tell you what we did with that input, how it informed the 3 options that we're going to present you tonight. Then we're going to offer a moment or two, more than a couple of moments, but a couple minutes for clarifying questions. If anyone has them, they can put them in the chat function then, or ask them via Zoom. And then again, the bulk of our meeting will be breaking up into small groups so you can provide your comments. We're going to have small group facilitators, about 3 or 4 rooms that we're going to put you in into Zoom. And then at about 7:25, we're going to come back here and just check in, tell you about next steps in the community engagement process. And that will cover everything, I think. Am I missing anything, Deanna, in terms of the logistics that you want to cover? Okay, let's keep things moving. Well, again, my name is Alex. I am the executive director of a nonprofit called Catalyze Silicon Valley. We care a lot about community engagement, and any opportunity we can work with VTA to do good community engagement, to have the community be a part of a process and shaping the decisions that government makes, we want to do that. So that's why we're here tonight. We're very grateful to be part of a team with Fair and Peers. Our lead consultants tonight will be Taylor and Alexandra, who you'll also see on your screen as Allie. So Allie and Alexandra, that's the same person, and they're part of our team. From VTA, we've got Deanna on the Community Outreach and Public Engagement team, Ian helping out tonight. Thank you, Ian, so much for making things go smoothly. And the main person overseeing this program, the Equitable VMT program, is Rob Zwerk, who's here with us as well. Again, thank you, Quinn, Eloisa, and Junting for translating. And I believe we've got Melissa Hernandez from Caltrans, who's helping fund part of the grant to do this work. So we wanted to invite Melissa to introduce herself and share any quick thoughts.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Melissa Hernandez, Associate Transportation Planner at Caltrans District 4 Bay Area. VTA has been awarded a Senate Bill 1 Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant for this project, and I'm the contract manager working with Rob Swerk and his team on this effort. This project is significant not only to this community, but to our region and our state as we do our part to equitably address climate change. Work being done by VTA is vitally important to the development of the state VMT mitigation and exchange system. So we at Caltrans really value the input that the community is giving to VTA's project. Caltrans is also currently developing VMT reduction strategies for our implementation plan. So it's been very beneficial to work with and learn from each other's efforts in creating efficient programs to mitigate VMT.
Thanks, Melissa. I don't know if everyone caught this, but I did. She said, we really value the community's input. And that is certainly true of VTA as well. So we're going to have some really rich conversations. And I'm so glad, Melissa, you could join us to hear from some really engaged, important community members joining us tonight. Let's go to our next slide. We probably don't need to spend much time on some of this. We've got probably some Zoom experts in the room, but we do want to say, if you want to turn your camera on, we welcome it. It will create a more interactive discussion. And as we all know, as human beings, there's so much that you can express through facial expressions. So if you want to come on camera, great. If you're cooking dinner and you've got to keep the camera off while you're doing your stir fry, don't worry about it. That's okay too. We are going to have folks on mute. And once we get into the small groups, it'll be a little bit more free flowing. But if you could stay on mute for now, that would be appreciated. We'll try to answer questions in the clarifying section. We are recording this Zoom. That way we have all the feedback. We'll also be recording in the small group discussions. That is so that we can truly and accurately capture what we heard. It's so our facilitators aren't taking notes and trying to facilitate the conversation at the same time, which is pretty difficult. So the fact that we record means that we can really truly go back, listen to your comments. It means people like Taylor and Allie and Rob can go and listen to all the group conversations, not just the ones that they're facilitating. So that's really super important. We'll try to take some notes, but really we're going to focus on the small group recordings as our way to track your important comments here tonight. Next slide, please. So another slide we may not need to spend much time on. We know that there's some great people in the room, and we don't expect any challenges here tonight, but we do just want to make sure we say that we ask you to be respectful of differing opinions. There are different options we're going to present, and everyone has a different perspective, and that is great from VTA's perspective. We just ask everyone to be respectful of those differences, sharing time so that everyone who's in the room has time to speak. I can be super talkative sometimes, so it's really important for me to create space for others to contribute as well. We will automatically mute folks, and if anyone gets really crazy and disruptive, we may have them leave the meeting, but we don't expect that tonight. So just some requests and rules of engagement for tonight's meeting. Next slide, please. So a lot of people know VTA. A lot of people in this room know a lot about what VTA does. And it's really important that we share the full extent, because VTA is not just the folks who run your bus routes and your light rail trains. They are involved in a lot of different aspects of transportation in our community. In fact, they're known as a congestion management agency, which means they spend time figuring out how to cut down on congestion in our community. And they not only operate the transit that is in our community, they also plan and help fund programs. And it's not just transit. It might be highway improvements to speed up traffic. It might be bicycle paths to help get folks moving on bicycle. And so they're not only involved in planning the future of transportation, they're also constructing it. So it's a dynamic agency with a lot of functions. And tonight you'll hear about another one of those that some of you may not know that much about, and we can't wait to share. So our goals for tonight's workshop, we're going to be sharing about this new program and the 3 options that we would like your perspective on, because we're developing these concepts and we want to get your thoughts on how to make them as successful as possible. So we're going to share the concepts in detail through our team at Fair and Peers. with Ali leading the way and Taylor joining as well. And then we're hoping to take all this input from tonight and some of the other community meetings we've done. We've done about 2 or 3 others in this second phase, and this is our last one in this phase. And so we're going to take this input and learn as much as we can and then come back and share that with the community. Next slide. So again, we've got some input already that we heard from you. That's what's informing this conversation. So we're really at this stage 2, the star you're seeing on the sheet is we're going to be taking these concepts and filtering them down even further, actually, and confirming how in the next phase of community engagement, how we will implement these ideas. So first off, we talked about general concepts. Tonight, we've got 3 to present to you. And then we're going to try to figure out how to implement them in the third phase. We're also talking to local governments, community-based organizations, and nonprofits to get their feedback to try to create a very wide-ranging group of stakeholders that are giving input to VTA. Next slide. So Deanna's going to lead a little poll. We wanted to ask some questions of the folks in the room. It's always helpful to know who's here. So if Deanna is launching that, you should see up on the screen right now. And if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to admit that I'm somewhere between 35 and 44, which I'm not thrilled about, but that's okay. And number 3 question is about your annual household income. You can answer that or prefer not to. And then number 4 is really important. What is your primary mode of transportation? How do you get around most frequently? Let us know. And thank you, VTA, for putting that in Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin. That's awesome. So why don't you take the next 30 seconds? If everyone can finish filling out that poll, that would be great. If anyone came late, we're just doing a quick little poll here, so feel free to fill that out. Deanna, results are coming in? Great. Deanna said results are coming in. Let's take another 20 seconds before we close that. So if folks can finish filling out that poll now, that'll give us a good sense of who's in the room. And Deanna, are we going to share that poll results? I put her on the spot. Okay. Great. No under 18 today, but we have somewhere between 18 and 24. Wonderful. That's great. Okay, thank you everyone for filling out that poll. That's awesome. So now we're going to get in the heart of the presentation, a little bit of information from Ali and from Taylor about this VMT program, explain all the good details of it. And we're going to do that. And then we're going to break up into small groups in a couple minutes. So this is going to be some really good content that's going to help set the context for our small group discussion. So listen in. If you've heard it before, that's okay. And then we'll break up into small groups very soon. So we'll be back to you soon. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Alex. So kind of as Alex been alluding to, the focus of this kind of project is on VMT. So if you could go to the next slide, Deanna. What is VMT? Well, VMT is just a way that we measure the amount of driving that happens in a community. And so in this case, the amount of driving in Santa Clara County. And so we just measure that by looking at the amount of cars on the road and how far they're going. So if you have 1 car going 1 mile, that's 1 VMT. And if you have 4 cars going 10 miles, that would be 40 VMT. And so it's just kind of a way we measure driving. And we do that because we know that there's a lot of benefits when we reduce our VMT. So if there's less driving, we know that's associated with better air quality. It produces less noise in our communities. When we focus on kind of taking cars off the road, we give more space for other ways to travel. It allows us to have kind of a more active community if we're promoting, ways of getting around other than sitting in your car. And when there are fewer cars on the street, it's a safer community too. And there's a lot of other co-benefits that, exist with part of this as well. So that's kind of why we're really interested in reducing VMT. Next slide. And so this project specifically, the goal of this project is to reduce VMT or reduce the amount of driving. And when we do that, we want to make sure there's still other ways for you to get around. So we want to expand other kind of alternative travel options for people in the county. And we want to do that in a way that both works across jurisdictional lines. And so we know that you don't just drive within your kind of own city, you kind of drive throughout the county, maybe even beyond the county. So I want to make sure that projects can kind of expand across different cities in the county, and that improves social equity. We're putting money into the county, and so we want to make sure we're doing that in a way that improves equity. Next slide. And so kind of just taking a step back to what this program could be, or what I'm talking about when I say this program. There are, as development happens, there are some developments that we expect will kind of generate more driving. So more people will be coming to and from them, they'll be driving there, and it causes more driving than what we've established as the appropriate threshold for the county. And so right now, people that kind of developments that generate excess driving, we ask them to think about different ways that they can reduce that for their development. But what this program could do is instead, when a development is expected to have too much driving, they'll pay a fee into this program. And the program can fund projects that could work across the county. So kind of bigger projects that could help improve other options and at the same time reduce VMT, and they could work across the county. And so what we're asking today is what could those projects look like that could be funded by this program? And we want to make sure that these programs, or sorry, these projects both reduce VMT, but also benefit your communities. So that's what we're asking for your feedback today. Next slide. So just taking a step back, as Alex mentioned, we came to the community as part of phase 1. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. In the winter, and we got a lot of great feedback. And some of the top things that we heard were kind of travel challenges in Santa Clara County was that taking transit takes a long time and it can be costly. There aren't very efficient or safe bicycle and pedestrian routes. Safety in general is a big concern for people traveling, and that's in terms of those biking and walking, but also in terms of like taking the bus, especially at night. And a lot of these other ways of traveling don't accommodate kind of people who have kids or people who have pets, and you're traveling maybe at different times of the day. And so it's not really always convenient, and sometimes driving is more convenient and can be quicker, but driving is not an option for everyone. And if you go to the next slide, we specifically asked what strategies best solve your biggest transportation challenge. And so we had people vote on these 6 different options. So first one is fast and frequent transit. Second is biking and walking paths. Something else that could be many things to do close by. So if your grocery store is closer to you, or your school is closer to your work is closer to you. And then we got votes on everything. Those were kind of the top 3 that people voted would solve their biggest travel challenge. Some other options that people voted on as well were changing travel costs. So we heard that transit was more expensive. If those costs were different, or if driving was more expensive, would that change solve your biggest travel challenge? On-demand mobility, so like bike share, car share, and then transit, bike, and carpool incentives. So kind of providing incentives for carpool or transit passes, that kind of thing. So like I said, we heard feedback on all of them, but our top 3 were frequent fast transit, biking and walking paths, and many things to do close by. Next slide. And so we then took your input and we kind of filtered it down to get to these projects that we'll present to you today. And so we kind of went through this 3-step process. And the first one, if you could go to the next slide. The first one is we took those 6 categories that we asked you all to vote on, and we needed to prioritize them. And so we put them in this order, but based on these questions. Does the project meet a community travel challenge? So that's basically what we asked to you is does this solve your biggest travel challenge? But it's also because this project is about reducing VMT, reducing the amount of driving. We wanted to make sure that that was also kind of reflected in our priorities. And then does the project work across jurisdictional lines? So can it work in multiple different places in the county? And ultimately, these will be implemented by this local governments, our cities. So we want to make sure that they're on board as well. So we need to make sure there's city support. And so we took this kind of criteria and prioritized these categories that we listed before. So if you go to the next slide. So this is the kind of prioritization that we came up with. So on the top was transit infrastructure. So that's physical improvements. Then transit service, that was also important. And then many things to do close by, biking, walking facilities. On-demand mobility was 5th. Transit, bike, and carpool incentives was 6th. And then change in travel costs was last. So that was kind of the first step. We got these reduction categories, and then VTA has this kind of ongoing list of projects that they want to implement, and they don't always have funding. So we took a look at their list and their projects and what might be good fit for this program. And using that prioritized list that we had, we took projects that kind of match those prioritization that we established. And so this was the list of projects that VTA came up with. And then next slide. Step 3 is we filtered through this project list a second time to make sure that it really fits the needs of this specific program. And so we asked 4 different questions. Again, does this project reduce VMT? Again, that's one of the main goals of this program. So we need to make sure that any project that is being funded by this program reduces driving. And then could the project be implemented quickly? That's not a requirement per se for this program, but when we're getting it up and running, when we're starting out this program, we want to make sure that it's something that's ready to go so that people can see that the money that's coming into this program, that's what's happening with it. So we want something that can be implemented quickly. And because this program is funded by development, which can kind of happen in waves, the money might come in kind of chunks. And so we want to make sure that these are projects that could withstand kind of waves in funding. And so we don't want something like adding a new bus line, because we don't want to add a new bus line when there is funding and then the next kind of month take away the bus line. That's not very reliable. So we want to make sure these kind of projects can be funded with uneven funding. And then lastly, just based on kind of the legal requirements of a program like this, there can't already be another funding source. So this has to be a project that needs funding and there isn't already funding for a project. So we took those 4 criteria from on our project list and we narrowed it down to these 3 projects: King Road bus speed improvements, enhanced van pool, and e-bike subsidies. And we'll go through these in more detail in a little bit. But just kind of last note on this kind of program itself. These are the projects that we've identified that could be funded by a program like this right now. And that's mostly because, like I said, it's not a requirement, but we want projects that are ready to fund or ready to implement. But in the long term, this program could include lots of different kinds of projects. And so some of those could be something like affordable housing, which has ties to reducing VMT, but it's a little bit too complex for us to implement right this minute. There's kind of some logistics we need to figure out for that. So there's lots of other kind of projects that could be part of this program. They're just not ready yet. And so I think with that kind of information, that's a lot of information. And so, yeah, if you have any questions, Taylor can kind of go through any responses.
Yeah, thanks, Allie. That was awesome. And thanks, Alex, for our intro. We will have lots of time to discuss kind of some of these details in our breakout groups, especially about those 3 project types Allie mentioned. But right now, we want to take clarifying questions. If you're completely confused about what we're here doing today, now's the time to raise those questions. And you can put something in the chat, or I believe you could also just raise your hand or unmute even.
Looks like Jordan is raising.
Yeah.
Do you want to take that question, Taylor?
Yeah, Jordan, go for it.
Yeah, so I believe on one of your slides, you said one of the criteria you were using was that you wanted to have projects that can be done, city to city, that you could do the same thing in each city, versus the King Road bus speed improvement seems to be a very specific project for a specific city. Can you speak to that at all? Like, is the idea that like you would do King Road bus speed improvements, but then you would then do that same thing in other cities, or is it really just it's just a very specific project?
Yeah, good question.
So I'm also curious what criteria led to King Road being on the list, but then Center being disqualified from the list, since they sound like the same thing, just on different roads.
Yes. I'll start with your first question, and then Rob, maybe I'll tee you up for the second one. So when we say we want it to be something that could be implemented across the county, we want it to be a type of project that is applicable across the county. So bus speed improvements are something that could be implemented in virtually every jurisdiction in the county. And so King Road is an example, but there's a whole network of VTA has identified of kind of highest capacity and highest priority corridors in the county. And so similar projects could be implemented anywhere. But the way this money works is we'll fund a very specific project. So this is maybe the one that goes in year 1. Something else Center or something else could go year 2. So yeah, that's the idea. And when we break out into the small groups, we'll talk about the idea of bus speed improvements more generally, because we think we'll just be able to do these elsewhere. We just need something to describe it more concretely. And then on Center, Rob, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, this is a good question. And Taylor, you did a good job giving the overview and the thinking. Just the thing that I would add is that we definitely gave consideration to Center Road and other VTA frequent bus corridors around the county. And we concluded Center Road is not the best example to give, just because I believe that the city of San Jose has actually recently secured grant funding to be able to install transit boarding islands on the route that serves Center Road. So we figured, let's not showcase a project that actually already has some funding towards speed improvements. Otherwise, it doesn't meet that important point that Taylor made about additionality. That under CEQA, the environmental law, we can't take credit for something that already is funded and in the works. But there's definitely lots of, a number of other corridors around the county that could benefit from bus speed improvements like this, for sure.
Awesome. I see 2 more questions in the chat, and I see a question from Cliff and then also Chris. And I am going to answer Cliff's question first, because I think it's a little more straightforward. And then I'll come back to your question, Chris. So how the funding would be generated from new development. Essentially, when new developments of a particular size are proposed, there's kind of a initial assessment of, you know, how much driving, what's the transportation picture gonna be like for this development, and for projects that are gonna generate a lot of driving, things like offices or really big housing developments or regional attractors like a Costco. These are things that are going to generate kind of an outsized amount of driving, whereas small housing developments, particularly affordable housing, local serving grocery stores, local schools, like they're not going to generate that much driving compared to like a regional average at least. And so these bigger developments, we've at the state and then the local level have come up with thresholds of what's an acceptable amount of driving on a per person basis usually. And sometimes projects exceed that level. And when a project exceeds that level, first order of business is to try to figure out how to reduce driving within the project site very locally. But sometimes that's not possible because of the location of the project or just other constraints. And so in that case, those developers could, instead of or in addition to doing what they can on their site, they would be able to pay into this new pot of money, this new program, and the program could reallocate those funds to a different program or to a different project, such as bus speed improvements, van pools, etc. And in terms of what levels are expected, is really dependent on the development market, like Ali said, kind of comes in waves, a little hard for us to predict. But we know there's less development now. We expect development to return, but it's also the type of development, like office versus residential, that would happen. So we have high hopes and feel pretty positive that at least in the medium to long term, this is a program that would generate a lot of money, but we can't say exactly when it would come. We're talking about millions of dollars though. Okay, and then Chris's question, and then I think we'll probably try to move on to the breakout groups, but let's see, there's a lot of question in this question. How were these projects selected, and what projects were left out? I think, again, we, particularly for this round of engagement, we wanted to identify some very specific projects that could be put into a program like this. This doesn't mean these are the only projects that would go in. And so others are still on the table, and that can be part of the breakout discussion as well. And so I would really encourage you to share some of those ideas you put in that chat comment in your breakout group, Chris, because I'm noticing a few that are really good ideas. They just might be more in that long-term bucket. And that could be because they're not totally well defined yet. Again, it could be because they already have some funding, or they might not be as effective at reducing VMT. A bike project, for example, we really love bike projects. They don't have as much impact. It's very low VMT reduction based on case study evidence. I know it's hard, your gut feel, you're like, well, I use a bike project, but because this is a CEQA project, there has to be really substantial evidence in order for us to say that. And in terms of light rail service or Caltrain service, like Ali said, is a little bit hard to fund because it's not chunky. It's hopefully very consistent if it's good transit service. And so that's why a service example might not have ended up in this, at least this first wave of projects that we're trying to put into the program. Others feel free to add. You're muted, Rob.
Thank you. Sorry, this is Rob from VTA. Thank you, Taylor. I think you answered that very well. Just to kind of reiterate, it would make VTA staff and, I think all the stakeholders that we've been speaking with very, very happy if a program like this were to move forward to implementation and were to be successful enough that we could actually fund with it things that require maybe longer lead time to develop, more substantial infrastructure, and eventually maybe transit service things like that are clearly needs in Santa Clara County, really anywhere, for getting people out of their cars and reducing VMT. But in the near term, just trying to get kind of a proof of concept, almost a pilot of a program going, the smaller scale kind of modular things that we've identified as sample projects here are things that we're trying to get input on. But as Taylor said, we can in the breakout groups talk about other ideas as well. Thanks.
Yeah. And I just want to make sure we have enough time for the breakout group. So I see your question, Jordan, and I'm definitely happy to stick around for a little bit after to try to answer that. Or if you have extra time in the breakout group, your breakout group leader could answer as well. Same for you, Daniel. So before we go into the breakout groups, I'm going to kind of intro a little bit more those 3 project types. So you can get, I think, hopefully a more concrete feel for what we mean. But what we're trying to hear from you is if the example we're giving is a useful example. So that was a comment in the chat that like, none of these are useful to me. So is there a way it could be useful to you if we defined it a little bit differently? Or maybe not you, but maybe your family member, or friend, or coworker, or whatever. So on the next slide, bus speed improvements are first. You can go to the next slide. And so what we mean by this is physical improvements, again, because these are things that kind of can be done all at once. So the kind of things we're talking about are boarding islands, which in this case are shown on their side boarding islands. Both of these examples have also side running bike lanes that are protected by the boarding island, but clear crossing path. And then what this helps with is the bus doesn't have to pull over to the side of the road and leave the travel lane. And so then it doesn't have to waste time merging back into the travel lane. The other thing is that we can install transit only lanes. These could be painted red lanes, or just like demarcated areas that are bus only lanes. And so these are things we need to install, particularly on transit routes that we know have congestion or delay issues. We can go to the next slide. So this is the example of King Road, and to the point of we want something that could be implemented rather quickly. The city of San Jose has already done some thinking about what this might look like. These are not final plans, and kind of what it might be different in different sections of the King Road corridor. But it would include dedicated bus lanes and transit boarding islands in at least most of the corridor. And then to your question, Jordan, on the next slide, this is just one example of a larger network of transit that VTA operates. And this is not the whole transit network, but these are high capacity corridors where the majority of riders are located now or in the future throughout the county. And so we would get the most VMT reduction benefit by investing in these corridors. And so these are likely other locations where we would implement similar bus speed improvements. So that's kind of that first idea. On the next slide, we have e-bike subsidies. And what is an e-bike? I think most people are familiar, but it is not, it's not motorized. Instead, as you pedal, it provides kind of an assist. And so it makes biking substantially easier, particularly if there are hills, or if you're carrying things or tiny people in this photo example. It just, you know, for me, when I ride an e-bike, I don't show up to my destination sweaty. It's that you can go quite a bit faster, quite a bit further. The trips are longer, and because of that, e-bikes in particular are a really good VMT mitigation measure because they can actually replace car trips. And that's not, the evidence at least isn't out there that regular analog bikes, if you will, replace the same types of car trips. And again, this is something that could really be implemented anywhere in the region. And so if we go to the next slide, just an example of how this might work, very specifically, is conveniently provided to us by the city of Mountain View, which is already doing a pilot program, giving e-bike vouchers based on income and household size. And so households can get between $1,000 and $1,500 in a voucher format to take to a local bike shop and purchase a new electric bike. I wasn't sure of this going into this program, but $1,000 is enough to cover some e-bikes. So it's up to you, the person purchasing, but in some cases, this could cover the full cost of the bike. Or it could be used for a more expensive bike and cover a portion of the cost. And unlike a rebate program where you get the money back later, this you're being given upfront. So this is the e-bike example, e-bike subsidy example. And then the third example we want to talk through is enhanced van pools. And if you go to the next slide, again, this is a type of service that VTA already helps to subsidize. So there are there's maybe 9 or so van pools in the county today. Most of them are kind of 9 to 5 office worker population van pools. But a van pool is where there's usually 7 to 15 people that can fit in one of these vans, and they commute together. The driver is one of the workers, not a paid county employee or VTA employee. And so they share driving responsibilities and share whatever portion of the cost is not covered by the subsidy from, in this case, MTC and VTA. But it's a $900 a month subsidy. And that covers the cost of the van, upkeep, and gasoline. And then the van itself is also provided. And this is something that we've thought, oh, maybe we could kind of expand this to other populations. So if you go to the next slide, there are lots of other types of workers besides 9 to 5 office workers who all go to work at the same time, shift workers in particular in different industries, but agriculture, warehouse, healthcare provision, and kind of industrial, just to name a few, all go to work at the same time and could potentially make use of a similar program. So it would need to coordinate people who live nearby one another and are going to a workplace. And in this example, the thought was there are a lot of people who commute from Gilroy up into North County. And so perhaps there are options to provide a van pool. So this is our third example. And I see questions coming in to the chat. And so, how many van pools are already in existence? 9. 9 in Santa Clara County, but lots more throughout the region. So I think we are ready at this point to break up into our groups. Looks like I think we'll have 3 breakout groups. So Alex, Rob, and myself will each lead 9 vans. 9 vans in the county. So please join your group and we'll regroup at 7:25.
Looks like we're all coming back, or some of us. Maybe we lost some of our friends to dinner time or long small group discussions. Ours was really good. We missed one of our group members who came in a little late, had to step away for a while, but we had an awesome discussion. Looks like this might be all of us. Everyone back from your group, Taylor and Rob? Okay, so Taylor, I'm going to jump into next steps now, if that's okay. And if we could go to the next slide. Thanks, Tiana. So again, we are wrapping up phase 2 of the community engagement process. We had some amazing engagement in phase 1, and thank you again for all of your input that you gave in your small groups. That was awesome. Again, we were recording or taking notes on that. The nice thing about this is VTA knows when the next step of community engagement is. It's going to be in the fall of 2024. We're going to come back for phase 3, and we're going to do some more meetings with the community. And we're going to basically now take everything that you've shared with us, take this feedback, and help us shape these 3 concepts into further refined programs. We're going to bring those programs back to you and say, hey, here's what we're thinking about how this might work. And you can again provide us feedback and say, hey, I think you might want to think about this, or I think this factor might be something that is worth exploring further. So that'll be really valuable. If you all want to stay engaged in the process, we welcome it. Some of you are already on our email sign-up list. And if you're not, we're going to share on the very last slide the website for this page, how you can stay engaged and continue to hopefully provide us feedback in the process. So we're also maybe looking at other project types based on some of the input we heard today. So really, again, really appreciate everyone's feedback and the expertise you all bring as community members to inform VTA's work. Next slide. And again, just a big thank you for everyone for being here. I just want to praise you all and VTA and Fair and Peers for finishing a meeting. Looks like right at 7:30. So that's always good. Again, VTA and Fair and Peers and I will stick around for another couple minutes. If anyone needs anything, we're happy to chat more. Again, appreciate all the feedback from the community. If you want more information, go to vta.org/equitablevmt or email Deanna and the community outreach team at community.outreach@vta.org to provide more feedback.
And if I could, this is Rob from VTA. If I could just add, thanks so much, Alex. If I could just add briefly before we wrap up that thank you so much for your time tonight. And if you're part of any organization, if it's a community organization, a neighborhood association, if there's a group that you're a part of that you'd like VTA to come give a presentation to and do sort of a working session like this, let us know. We would be happy to come to give a custom presentation and do kind of exercises and receive feedback from your group. So thank you again.
Thanks, everyone. Good night. Take care.
Thank you.